Check 1 2, Zoomland. Hello.
Try again. Keep trying again, talking, right?
Brad's mic check.
Alright, do it again. Hopefully my phone doesn't time out. Now you have an idle screen and it times out after like a couple minutes.
For the Wednesday, December 1st, how was it December already? Public Works meeting. You've noted the roll. Okay. I will make a note for folks that are here, even if you're not going to speak, if you could sign in just so that we know who's here, that would be helpful. If you did want to speak, please fill out a small sheet and bring it up to the dais. So,
Where do you want?
I'll take. Thank you. I will take a motion for the approval of the minutes from the October 6th and the October 21st meeting.
I move approval.
Second.
Any further discussion, changes, or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We'll move on to the appearances section. If you could just give me a minute, I'm going to take a look at what we've got here so that I can try and pronounce names appropriately. All right. Last call? Okay. So tonight, I am going to hold people to 3 minutes. Just because I know we've spoken on this a lot, and there's a tremendous amount of new information at this point, and so to keep the evening moving, I'm going to keep people to 3 minutes. So if you're getting close to your 3 minutes, I will kind of make a motion so that you're aware that you need to wrap it up. And if you go over, I may have to cut you off. So we'll go ahead and call our first person. Chris Bondurant would like to speak for informational purposes only.
Well, I mean, what I want to
If you want to come up,
I guess I wanted to speak after the proposals and all that, right? No?
This is the time, otherwise.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just put in my 2 cents. I live at 6209 Midwood Avenue, so I would like to know where, with one of the options with one way, is that vehicles one way? Is that bikes one way? Because where is the traffic going to go that's rerouted out South Winnequa? Is it going to go down Midwood? My road's not built.
So I should have said this earlier. So we're not getting into a dialogue. You can make a statement, but we can't answer questions at this point. This is just the appearances section.
Well, okay. I guess I'd like to propose some information about that. I'd like to know what your ideas are with that. And if we could get some crosswalks at Owen Road and Crosswoods, maybe stop signs or the flashing lights. We have a beach and we have a park there, and you have a road that you're worried about controlling traffic on. Has that been proposed? Maybe turn it into one big intersection, a sidewalk on one side between Owen and Crosswoods, for the kids that don't need to cross to the beach but want to get over to the park. I think there's a lot of more creative ways to take care of this. I'm totally against the one-way traffic, because there's a reason I didn't buy a house on Winnequa Road. I grew up on Winnequa Road. So, I mean, you take into consideration what the traffic is on the road that you buy. I didn't buy a house on Thunderbird Lane because I didn't like the hill. I didn't trust my kid coming down on a bike. I didn't expect the city to level it out or go out of their way to make sure. So, another thing that I brought up at a different meeting is, do we have truck routes to the city? Are we going to keep trucks off of South Winnequa? Trucks with trailers and loaders, all kinds of stuff is going up and down Winnequa Road all the time. So somebody's going to get hurt. That is one
You've got 30
possibility.
seconds.
Okay. I'd also like to see a crosswalk at Graham and Bridge Road, possibly a stop sign to control traffic there. It's awful busy, it's awful fast in the morning. There again, you have another park. You have 2 crosswalks there, but no stop sign, no yield. And then just down at Graham and Midwood where I live, there's a yield sign, but the bushes are up so high, I stop all the time. Is that going to be considered a stop sign if it goes to the one-way? So,
Thank you.
okay. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Kurt Stewart would like to speak in favor of alternate one south of Owen, alternate 5 north of Owen, and rushing the design.
Hi, Kurt Stute, 6003 Wintercore Road. So I'm concerned about how fast this is all moving. I know the city council just asked for the one-way proposal, and quite honestly, the one-way proposal that was given here seems either very poorly designed or intentionally designed to make it not feasible. There seems like there's a bunch of different ways you could do that one-way design that would be way better, like combining that sidewalk and bike lane on the east side and making it a multi-use path. Quite honestly, it looks like that should be, in the cons here, it says it's going to take out up to 5 trees. If that's done correctly, it shouldn't take out trees at all. Based on what's currently in front of us, I would say do Alt 1 south of Owen. There's a pretty darn good system already in place there. Do a modified Alt 5 north of Owen and stay within the footprint. It should cost a whole lot less than what they say here. If that was a actually well-done plan, it would solve a lot of problems. Look, I'm not really against sidewalks, but the topography of this area and the way it's already built out with houses and everything make it very difficult to do. A reminder that the City Services Important Index does have maintenance and appearance of city parks and greenways as the 12th highest priority for citizens that were asked in 2013. Bike and pedestrian accommodations, which includes bike lanes and bike racks, is at 16, and the city sidewalk system is at 29. And I know there are members here who will say you can't possibly take that data by itself, that importance data by itself, without looking at the quality of it. And I disagree. This seems pretty darn clear to me. If this isn't what they intended, then they'd have a really poor survey. Yeah, city sidewalk system's high in here, but it's entirely because it's what we currently have is poorly executed. Some of that's because of lack of sidewalks, some of that's because we don't maintain the sidewalks we currently have. We're going to maintain what we get coming here better. So just a reminder, pay attention to the green spaces, pay attention to the trees. For me, that's the most important thing. That's why I'm promoting this alternate 1 south of Owen and modified alternate 5 north of Owen. I think you could do it without cutting down any trees, without changing the aesthetic appeal of Monona. I ask you not to consider these parking bays that are in several of the proposals up here. They just take out more green space, more trees.
You've got about 12 seconds.
And quite honestly, it seems like we're in a heck of a rush here, and I don't know why. If you've gotten in problems before by rushing these processes, if it's because of deadlines, then wait a year to get it right. Don't rush this through just to meet a deadline to meet budgets.
Thanks. Next, we'll have Tim Casper, who will speak against.
Tim Casper, 5711 Winnicott Road. I couldn't agree with Mr. Stute more. This is being rushed. There's a complete lack of communication about what needs to be done about this. We spent more money on new engineering drawings that didn't do what they were asked to be done, which is put this within one footprint. There's no point in doing it the way the engineers designed it. It makes absolutely no sense. Second, the sidewalks need to go, if we're going to do this, all the way to Healy, so it ties in with the rest of the walks in the city around the park. The resurfacing of the road is already going to Schluter, which is 1 block away. I can't imagine how foolish it is to stop there and not go another block and tie these sidewalks in. I mean, we're in a rush here. There's a complete lack of communication. We paid for something here that is absolutely useless, and I think we need to spend some time on this and look at it a little more.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Travis Human, who would like to speak in favor?
Hi. I'm not really sure what I was voting in favor or against, since there were like 4 options. But I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. It's clear that based on traffic count that this is a collector street. It's not designed as a collector street. It's designed as a residential street. But everybody that is basically mid or north in Monona ends up using this if they want to go on the Beltline. So we really do only have 2 options because what we have doesn't work. So we either are going to have to widen it, make it a real arterial street, you know, like Dean or Flom, and really like turn it into a safe arterial street, or we can disincentivize people from actually driving on it. So I'm not sure which of the ones, you know, really do that, but I'm in favor of things like speed bumps. I'm in favor of turning it into a one-way. Like, if we can reduce the amount of traffic on it without taking up a lot of this green space, without, you know, taking out trees, I think that's just going to be a positive. And it's going to shift people over to the actual arterial streets like Monona Drive and get them off of what is really should be a residential street. So, thanks.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? I know people came in late. You sure can. So next we'll have Dave Whitty, who would like to speak against sidewalks.
Hi, Dave Whitty. I live at 5802 Winnequa Road with my wife and my 3 young daughters. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I've spoken many times in front of this group as well as others. I would ask this group of individuals to really take the time to go through all the different options tonight and understand what Mr. Stude and Mr. Casper talked about. The last time we were here, we wanted and we asked for an option for a sidewalk within the boundaries of the current footprint. You know, I would completely agree with Mr. Casper. It seems as if the engineer was led to create a plan that we knew wouldn't work. And that, to me, is really, really challenging when there is a way by putting the sidewalk in to the footprint with a one-way approach. But the way the engineer was instructed to draw it or has drawn it, it's not at all the intention or what we discussed in the last meeting. So, you know, I hope the city council and the mayor will listen to your recommendation. If you're the ones who are the knowledge, that have knowledge base in the background regarding this area, and I hope that you really think hard if we're ready to move forward about it, or if we need to take more time, because the plans that we've received from the engineers now was discussed, and again, this is now up to $1.5 million approved in the budget. If we're going to go that high, then let's make sure that we're doing it right. And if we're going to go above it, which I don't think we need to, because I think the alternative 5 is not accurately drawn, I think it can be done for cheaper. And let's make sure we're spending our taxpayers' money appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a few people that wish to register but not speak. Fred Hyde would like to register against. And George Lightburn would like to register in favor of number 1, combined bike ped path, and number 2, one-way. And then we did get several emails that I did want to mention. David Cerrone, he would like to keep costs low, improve safety for ped and bike and vehicles, keep curbs and current footprint. Lisa Ryle supports a one-way option in the same footprint. Julie Mueller would like the same footprint with buffered bike lanes. Barb Sainsbury supports a one-way option. Simon Rare potential to postpone due to cost. Joe Douglas, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, is against any improvement whatsoever. Brian Check is against option 4 and against the one-way option, but supports option 1, or a bike boulevard. Bart Ciancillo wonders about the focus on South Winnequa when Maywood to Healy has no bike lanes or sidewalks. And then finally, Ben Redding is registering in support of sidewalks and not the multi-use path. Those are the people that would like to register for the appearances section. Is there anyone else? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I came in late.
That's okay. If you want to just make sure you fill out a form, and if you could step up to the podium, I'm giving people 3 minutes. If you state your name and your address for us, that'd be great.
Tom Thompson, 5705 Winnequa Road. There were several good points made here. Right now, we started this with a traffic count from 4 years ago now that we aren't witnessing right now. We don't know what's going on as far as costs are concerned. Just rushing this through right now. What scares me is I look at the, of course, my phone, don't you know? Excuse me. My original concern was what's going on the corner of Bridge Road and Broadway. We don't know what's going on there. We don't know what that traffic's going to be like. We've got 96 more units being rented out there, and we have not witnessed what traffic pattern is going to be taking place down there when we don't have a pandemic. Now, maybe that's never going to happen. If we're all locked in and we don't have to worry about the traffic, I think our concerns for safety are somewhat minimalized. It just bothers me that we're rushing through to try to make a decision that we started with a whole different set of facts, and we don't know what the facts are now. Nobody does, of course. What we do know is the costs have gone up dramatically the last year. That's supposed to be temporary. If it is temporary, 2 years from now, this would be less costly, whatever we do. If it isn't temporary, you're just up in the air on this thing. I don't think the dangers, the safety concern that we had originally is there right now. I sit on that road, I drove it, I see traffic, but I don't see anywhere near the number of cars going by every day that we were told were there originally. It just doesn't make sense to rush through on this. My original proposal on that one way was strictly to cut down the afternoon traffic, purely thinking of what's going to happen at that corner of Bridge Road and Broadway when you have now 200 residents and 100 units of apartment or of motel all at that corner living there, and all the commercial that's there is now open for business 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. What's that corner going to be like? We don't know right now. I've been driving it. Sometimes it's crowded, sometimes nobody's on it. There's just too many unknowns right now. Why rush into doing this at this point? I don't see that the need, I think the long-term need is going to be there. I really love that recommendation of let's get rid of trying to make this an arterial.
You've got like 10 seconds, sorry.
Okay. So the young man who made that recommendation saying let's slow it down, make this a residential traffic makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you. If you could just fill out one of the little forms before you go. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the appearances section at this point. Item number 5 is unfinished business. We don't have unfinished business this evening. Item number 6, new business. The discussion and additional research for design and engineering of South Winnequa options as it pertains to locating pedestrians off the street in consideration of any new recommendations to the council. So if you recall, I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are. Back in July, we voted on the budget, and we took up the idea of the reconstruction of South Winnequa, and this body voted against including sidewalks in that budget item. And then we discussed a preliminary option or design for South Winnequa, and this body voted for option 4, and it went on to council, and at which point the council decided to send it back to Public Works. And I'm going to read. At the November 15th meeting, the City Council members voted to send this topic back to Public Works to continue discussion and consideration of design options that remove pedestrians off South Winnequa and onto either a sidewalk or multi-use path. The council directives for options to consider were provided to Strand Associates. And then that was how we got to where we are this evening. And that's our task for this evening, is to discuss and potentially consider, although I will say that it's up to this body whether there is consideration or if we decide to vote or not. We've already voted twice on this idea. So I want to make it clear that that's also an option, is to just not vote. So with that said, I think I'll open it to Josh. If Josh wants to go through your new slides, and then we can have more discussion.
Brad.
Josh, are you able to hear me?
Yep, I was just unmuting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for accommodating me virtually tonight. It's like you said, Jennifer, what we understood in conversations after the council meeting was, the council directed us to look at ways to, further explore potentially a multi-use path also on the east side, and then also potentially trying to get this one-way version, but we still the option to get pedestrians off the street. I do hear the residents, they tend to beat me up a lot over this. Why don't we just paint it and keep everybody on the street where they are? And it's tough. I've been dealing with that same kind of thought for a while of, can we do that? I can't find examples that's being done anymore. I've talked to somebody else in the background.
Excuse me, if you could mute your mics, if you're listening to us, thank you.
Sorry. So, I've reached out to different agencies and I've had a lot of discussions with the NPO, that's the regional planning, traffic organization here in the county and city of Madison. Talked a little bit to the county and DOT about this, and, I come back and I feel good about what I'm recommending, because none of them would recommend something on the street either, where we would just paint lines and allow, people to continue to walk on the road. That's the whole idea of the project to begin with. If we were going to allow people to walk on the road, you could just leave it as it is, right? So, why change it if you're going to kind of have the same thing where you're going to mix bikers and peds the way you do currently on the road. So, moving forward, I guess I have a few other options tonight. We can talk through those, and we can talk through some of the pros and the cons. Some of the stuff that I've talked about, talked to other agencies if you want more information. I tried to get a bunch of facts where I could to try to support some of it. And, what I thought, Jennifer, tonight is, let me just walk through the different sections really quick, and then walk through kind of like the pros and the cons, talk a little bit about the one-way, and then just kind of take questions, and we can go from there.
Sounds great.
So first what you're seeing on your screen.
For continuing to cover the story and to support the story.
If you could mute your mics, thank you.
So what you're seeing on the screen now is the existing south and north. And just a quick recap, the south side of this, Owen and South, has 33 feet of pavement width. Can you see my hand mouse to Jennifer on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. 33 feet on the southern end of pavement and 30 feet on the north end. So it narrows as it gets up to the north end. A lot of reason for that is, we have the two walls. We have a retaining wall holding back, physical dirt, and we have a decorative wall on the other side of us. So we looked at several alternatives in the past. One was a minor reconstruct take out the bump outs, restripe it, and allow biking and walking to take place in the same facilities, which would be 6.5 feet with buffered lanes there. That's $900,000. We take off no parking, and it would maintain, I'm only looking at the southern section now, 33 feet. So what I did is I drew this red line to show you the options that it's staying where it is, right? So the next alternative was option 3. Option 2, if you recall, didn't have a sidewalk, but it was the same as option 3. We just scratched that and put in the sidewalk, was the direction a few meetings ago. So option 3 includes exactly the same thing as option 1. We take out the bump outs, we restripe everything, and the sidewalk goes in on the east side.
I'm sorry to stop you here, Josh, but if you could like yell into your mic. Unfortunately, we're having trouble hearing you here, and we're up at our peak.
Is it really hard to hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little better.
Okay.
Feel free to holler.
So the fourth option was a multi-use path on the west side. By putting a multi-use path, you got the bikes off the road, you narrowed the roadway, which helped decrease speed, and we proposed an 8 to 10 footer, 10 feet would be preferred, but you get 3 feet of overlap. So 3 feet of additional past where that existing curb is on the west side of the road. Again, I'm still showing that minor reconstruct. We're still on the south side. This is a new alternative. What if we put the path on the east side of the roadway? Same thing. It's no different than the west side. We got 3 feet of encroachment on the opposite side. Now we look at a one-way, which some people may not agree with, but I have talked to numerous agencies, looked up numerous standards for this, and this is how you would do it. If you had the space to do it, this is what you would do. And note that it doesn't actually go outside the existing curves. It stays within the existing curves. So you would have your existing curves stay on this side. You'd have a 5-foot bike lane, an 11-foot drive lane, a physical separation for the bikes going the opposite direction. Why do we have that? We have that because you have vehicles approaching and you're going against traffic. If it's not this, the next step down is actual little bollards, which snowplows are going to probably take out. And then lastly, you would just paint it. If you paint it though, that's the least safest because they can still run into this bike head-on collision. Then we had the 4-foot terrace because there was a space in the sidewalk. This all fits within the existing curves on the south half of the roadway. Yes, it does cost more because there's so much more reconstruct here than using existing pavement when you put this in. If we really want to go one way, we can talk about some other options that would cost less. I'm going to have a hard time approving those, but if that's what the city wants to do, we can go that route. But I want to talk to you more about the one-way prior to even having that discussion. I'm going to move on to the north. Are you still having a hard time hearing, Jennifer, or is it okay?
If you could keep loud, it would be great.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to see if I can move closer to this. So I'm going to come off the camera. Can you hear me better here?
It's about the same, so why don't you be comfortable, Josh? We'll do it with the best we can. We can always ask questions.
So on the north side of this roadway, what you're seeing is the same minor reconstruct. Right up against the wall, that's where the existing curb is today on the east side. And here's where the existing curb is, only 3 feet away, minimum, against that decorative wall. 3 feet. When you add the sidewalk to this portion, we run out of room, right? We just can fit it in here, but the curb is right up against that decorative wall. Now, we've had people say that's too close to this wall. We don't disagree that is very close to this wall. If we had to move the wall, we looked into costs with contractors. To relocate that existing wall the way it is today, use the old stone, it's roughly going to be $250,000. To build a new wall that roughly looks the same but is new stone, it'd be $150,000. So there's two different costs here for that. Above and beyond what you see here, if you were to actually move that wall. Option 4 we talked about before, the multi-use path on the west side. 2 feet of encroachment passed, still very close to the wall. And then we show them again option 4A, which is the path on the other side. It's just opposite of the other one. Same encroachment of 2 feet. We got to move all the curbs to get this to work. So it's more expensive on the east side of the roadway because we have to move this curb to make it work. One way up here also fits within the existing right-of-way, except the curb has to move 2 feet to get the one-way to work as we are proposing. Those are the alternatives. Do you want to discuss those, anything about those right now? Or should I keep moving on?
Do we have questions at this point? I'm sorry, we can't take discussion from the, sorry.
I have a question just in general, Josh. You put the sidewalk on the east side, but the multi-use path on the west side. How did you determine, or what have you used for criteria to determine where the bikes and the walkers, which side you should accommodate those on, the east or the west side of the street?
You're saying that if we had to pick one or the other, Kathy? Like, how are we to determine that?
Yes. How did you determine that? Yeah.
So each one of those options show it either way. So they can go on either side. I have kind of a pros and cons list here that I will talk about if we want to go into that, and which is better and which isn't, and for what reason. But they could go on either side. So the multi-use path could go on the east or the west. Personally, I think, it's a toss-up either way, and we can discuss that and why in a second. And then the sidewalk, honestly, if I were to do the sidewalk and make this the most cost-effective, I probably would go back with the original option that we proposed from the very beginning of this project. And I'm going to turn to it now. So here's the sidewalk right here. When I get to Owen, I would keep it on the east side because the east side of the roadway is where most of the walking traffic is coming from. So they won't have to cross the street. But we run into the situation where we get to both of these walls and we have an issue. So what we proposed from the very start of this project 3 years ago was cross at Owen, cross the sidewalk across at this Owen intersection, follow the sidewalk on this side, on the back side of the wall. Don't move the wall. There's plenty of right-of-way here. Put it on the back side of the wall, this whole stretch, until you get to Maywood and cross it back over. The only people you're leaving outside of that sidewalk are the few people that live here, and most of the people along Winnequa Drive are arguing that they don't want the sidewalk. So that's the easiest solution. That's the cheapest solution, too, for a sidewalk, is to actually jog it at Owen. You pick up everybody on this side of the road, and everybody, when I go to this map, most of the people from Owen, Frostwoods, all of this walking traffic would walk in the sidewalk, cross here, and then cross back over at Maywood and head up. Ultimately, the sidewalk would go up Maywood and hit Nichols. That's the easiest place for you to get the sidewalk to. Can it go all the way this way to Healy? Yes. This is going to involve a lot of walls and a lot of cost. The natural way, the course to get up is to Nichols and then down to Aldous Park and all of the schools. That's what's emphasized in some of the bike plan, too. It also is along Winnequa, but there's a lot more cost that goes in this section for a sidewalk. Here is a detour map. So, if yellow was all one way, everybody asks, where would all the traffic go? I talked to the MPO at great length about this. They, in all of their studying, and what they do is they look at streetlight, different type of information it's called, and they can model it all. They know exactly where people are going. Nobody is cutting on Monona Drive down Winnequa this way and taking Winnequa. All the cut-through traffic on Monona Drive is going Frostwoods to Bridge Road down to Broadway. And it's something that at least we believed and the staff at Monona believed for a long time. And that's what the MPO told us too. That's what they get out of their modeling. Nobody from Monona Drive is cutting through the neighborhood to come down Winnacle Road. All of Winnacle Road's traffic is really the inner side, the inner parts of the city. So all this traffic has to get back to the city. When it comes back on a one-way, it's likely going to go up Ridge Road, all the way up to Frostwoods, come back up, and then as you can see, disperse as it wants to get over to this area. Yes, there's a little bit of minor traffic for the people that can't go up Winnacle Road, that live on Winnacle Road, to make these go-arounds, right? So some of these other side roads are going to get a little minor traffic for the people that live right along Winnacle Road. But the majority of that traffic heading north, and MPO would agree that it's going to go up this Ridge Road, come up to Frostwoods, head north, and then disperse out back up to Nichols and back to Winnacle Road here, so I can get over into the area where all this traffic's coming. That kind of shows you where that traffic is going to go. You know, people are going to say, well, we need to do a traffic study to show that. There's no way to show that. You'd have to do a traffic demand model, and I can tell you, the MPO would agree that that is typically what's going to happen out of it. It'd probably be a waste of your money to prove that. To try to prove that, because that is what's happening, because everybody coming down this road, like the MPO discussed, is everybody that's living north of that road or living on that road as part of this. The only traffic that's coming off Monona Drive that the MPO knows that's coming down Winnacle Road is all of the bike traffic.
Josh?
Other than that, they don't believe there's any other vehicle traffic coming down there.
Josh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just wondering if it might be possible for you to call in so that we could get you your mic possibly by phone.
Yeah.
Do you guys know how to turn this on?
I can hear you good, but I can't hear the others that good either. So
okay.
It's probably all on my end. Give me a second while I pull up the Zoom link on my phone, and then I will. I'll call in right now. That's probably better because I'm shouting here and I'm getting hoarser.
Take your time. We'll pause for a moment.
No, it shouldn't take long. I'm wondering if I could just sign in here and then just leave my volume on. So it's asking Brad for you to log me in. Yeah.
Brad's going to log you in.
He's on.
You're on.
Yeah. Just give me a second.
So I think you might have to mute your computer. Yeah, mute your laptop, and then you can use the phone.
Yeah. I'm still going to get it. I'm going to try that.
Can you turn off the speakers on the laptop?
Can you turn off the speakers on your laptop? Okay. And if you can just turn your sound all the way off. The wonders of virtual technology. No.
He's going to unmute once the TV's turned off.
Are we still getting feedback?
Talk again.
I can hear feedback.
Yeah, we're getting feedback. I don't know.
Josh, I think you have to mute that TV.
Yeah. Feedback now.
Can you and the audience hear?
It is muted.
No, okay.
Try again, Josh.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Yeah.
There it is.
It was just because when I went back to this one, it was unmuted on the top part. But can you hear that? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you can be a little louder, but it's clearer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So where were we? You know, what I was showing here was just the one way. And the one way being the fact that these red bold lines show the distribution of traffic as it heads back to the north. In all of our conversations with the NPO and the studies that they did and looked at traffic, they don't believe any traffic is coming from Monona Drive to Winnacle Road and down Winnacle Road. All the traffic that cuts over from Monona Drive goes Frostwoods to Bridge Road, south to Broadway. So all of this traffic that's coming south on Winnacle Road is all local traffic to the neighborhood. The only thing that's coming off of Monona Drive is the bikes. And they can actually track that, and it is the bikes that are coming off and then back to Winnacle Road. So what I'm showing here in this map is, you know, the traffic needs to get itself back around. And in talking with the NPO, Bridge Road up to Frostwoods, and then back up Bridge Road, and then distribution back out to Nichols and back over to Winnacle Road is how the traffic's going to travel north. There's going to get some minor street traffic here only for the people that live on Winnacle Road, that instead of going all the way up and around, they're going to cut through these side streets to get back to their homes along Winnacle Road. That is the one-way portion. So, you know, this is going to create other issues. And in talking with the NPO, a one-way, you know, they were kind of scratching their head at too a little bit of, you know, there's not a good one-way alternative back the other direction without detouring through a bunch of other residential streets that potentially are going to have their own problems. We had somebody here tonight talk about one on Bridge Road, and I know Dan's got several calls and already deals with the amount of cut-through traffic that happens along Crosswood and Bridge Road that heads down to Broadway from Monona Drive. So this is only going to escalate the problem at some of the intersections. The other thing is, and the MPO agrees with this, and I've done a lot of kind of looking into it as far as one-ways don't slow speeds, they only increase speeds. So you're looking to increase, you know, the MPO wrote Doug and other alders back and said, you know, if you're really looking to decrease speed, you know, the one-way isn't necessarily the alternative that's going to do that for you. Narrowing the roadway will do it for you, or, you know, traffic calming to some degree is probably the only real way you're going to be able to do it on this corridor. Do I need to go back through any of these typical sections? So, Kathy, to answer your question is, all of these show, like, option 4A is multi-use path on the east side, option 4 straight the other way was multi-use path on the west side. So, sidewalk, I did, when you couldn't hear me, I said I would go back to the first option we came up with when we understood that, you know, we thought we were going to put sidewalk along this road because the main object of this whole thing was to get people off the roadway, which most of the traffic agencies in this county would agree with. If you could do that on this roadway with this amount of traffic that's on here and the bike traffic that's on here, is we were going to put sidewalk along the east side because that is the side that a majority of the walking traffic come from, whether they're coming from Graham or any of this other residential. We carry it all the way up, past Greenwood, past Crosswood, all the way up to Owen, and then we get into this tight section where you can see the yellow. That yellow tight section is where the walls are. And we can't really fit one very nicely along that east wall. So our initial proposal was, let's go over to the other side. Let's cross the road here with the sidewalk. We could do it at one of these speed humps, cross the road, go to the other side. We can't fit between the decorative wall and the road, but look at all this right away. Let's just go to the back side of the wall with the sidewalk, carry it all the way over to Maywood and cross it back at Maywood. The reason to cross it back at Maywood is the natural and least cost option would be able to send the sidewalk right up Maywood to connect to the sidewalk on Nichols, and then you got your connection to the parks, to the library, to everything else because you have sidewalks there. Can we carry it along Winnacle Road? Yes, but you're going to have a lot of retaining walls. The cost is going to go up. If you go out there and drive that, you'll know what I mean when you get up into this section. There's steep yards that come right down to the curb. And the only way to get an ADA accessible sidewalk in there is to put a bunch of retaining walls on those sections to get that sidewalk to work. So Maywood's the natural next spot if you were to make that connection from basically your kind of city down, city center where all the parks and the public facilities are, down to Bridge Road and Broadway. And I don't know if you caught on my alternatives before, but we looked into and asked contractors about moving this wall, the decorative wall. And in order to keep the decorative stones, they figured it'd cost them around $250,000 to replace that full wall in its current state with new blocks that, they try to obviously make it look the same. It's not going to look old and rustic like it does now. It would be $150,000. So, that's a big cost to move that wall when, again, just thinking through engineering thoughts here, you can go behind it, right? You lose a couple more trees, and I know that's a bad thing too, but there's also a cost in tree, thought that has to go as part of that, with all of this. So, I'm here to show you, I guess, this also tonight, and that is, I wanted to go through all these and just kind of gut check them with myself, gut check them with my 400 plus colleagues, gut check them with other colleagues at other firms, and gut check them with the MPO, right? And I put these questions to other people, and here's what I got. Alternative one, where we do nothing, pet safety. Obviously, it's poor. The pets stay on the roadway. Everybody would say out of all the alternatives, it's the least desirable. Alternative three, where we put sidewalk in, actually is the best for the pedestrians. If we're just looking at pet safety, it's the best for pedestrians. Alternative 4 at 4A with a multi-use path is good, but you're still mixing bikes and pets. This is the lake loop. A lot of people take this loop on a timed course. The bikes do go fast. So, on a multi-use path, it's still really good, but it's not as good as just a sidewalk on its own. The one-way option, if you provide a sidewalk for it, is great too, as far as just pedestrian safety. Now, bike safety. Buffered bike lanes on street are great. When I say buffered bike lanes, we have the space to provide a bike lane and also provide 2 or 3 feet of painted room between the bike lane and the driveway, because we're getting rid of that parking in the cell path. On the multi-lane option, they're still good, but it's not as good as being, in its own facility. So, and on the multi-lane option, they got to cross a bunch of driveways, which is never great for bikes. Several people have pointed that out before. It's actually better on the east side with only, I think, 21 and 32 on the north side. I have that on a different slide if we want to look at that. On the one way, it's great too because we can buffer. Speed control. Where do we get the best speed control? There's going to be an increase on 1 when you take the bump outs out. There's going to be an increase on 3 too, because it's the same thing with the bump outs out. How do we can mitigate this with speed humps and other things. The best speed decrease out of all the alternatives is the multi-use path because we narrow the roadway. We narrow the roadway up to take the bikes off the roadway. We think, and a lot of my colleagues in other agencies think that the worst case for speed is the one-way. You don't have any opposing traffic. It will go the fastest on a one-way. People will say, where are the facts? There's a lot of written research on it. We can provide documentation. I can reach out to the MPO, but they stated the same stuff. They think that probably has the greatest out of all of them for speed increase. Tree impact. Here you see them 5, 10, 8, 13, 5. None of them avoid tree impact. None of them. The 10 with the sidewalk, 3 of those are ash of the 10, so there's only 7 here. So it's not really that much different. It's actually better than a multi-use path for a sidewalk because we can meander and walk around a lot of other things. Now, if you were to sidewalk around the back side of that decorative wall, I think you're going to lose probably 3 or 4 more trees. So you're going to get closer to this multi-use path scenario if you have it on the east side. Encroachments, when I mean encroachments as part of this, what I'm talking about is anything outside the existing curb line. There's nothing to remove the bump out that stays within the existing curb line and hardscape. When we go to the sidewalk, there's 5 feet on the east side, right? of additional sidewalk, basically. And then there's even a little bit more on the north side when we get towards the decorative wall, because we have to widen the roadway there. Multi-use path on both scenarios is 3 on the south side and 2 on the north side. That north should be down here. So you got 2 to 3 feet. And then for the one-way, we can keep the one-way within the existing curb line on the south side, but you still have to get out of it to maintain a sidewalk on the north side. Is there other alternatives for a one-way that don't cost $1.6 million? Yeah, there are. They involve trying to stay within the roadway, and there's not a lot of cases where those are anywhere that not in the situation with this many driveways, whether you do a multi-track for the bikes, or you provide a sidewalk space for the walkers. We can get into the one-way more. I didn't want to get into that one too much. I almost feel like, Jennifer, I feel like the committee needs to decide, do we want to continue to talk about the one-way option? And if we do, what other options do we want to talk about within the one-way option tonight? And if we don't want to talk about it, why go into exploring all the different one-way options if the one-way is not something that everybody can live with? I did the pros and the cons for each alternative too, and I tried to do the pros and the cons based on input that we were more given at these meetings versus just, other stuff, that I could find in other places. I tried to keep it with what people were saying at these meetings. I want to jump down to the one-way right away. Sidewalks for pedestrians, great. Removal of the bike conflicts and ped conflicts, great. Fits within the existing footprint on the south end, great. All these are great, they're pros. Here are the cons. It is going to increase the potential speed along that roadway. We can mitigate that potentially. There is 21 driveway conflicts for the bikes. Put them on that multi-use or path that you're going to have. They have to cross driveways that they aren't crossing today because they're already on the street and cars know they're there. That is a conflict separate than what there are on the street. There's snow removal issues, especially if we put a raised separation in there, which most agencies would tell you, put a raised separation in there for head and bike safety because there's one-way traffic. There's sidewalk maintenance. Anytime I put a sidewalk in here, everybody said, well, you have to maintain it. They're right. You have to maintain the sidewalk. You have to shovel a sidewalk, and Public Works has to maintain it. There's a big traffic inconvenience here. I showed you that detour map. They will have to disperse. There's not another alternative. The MPO does not believe they will go over to Monona Drive, cut back further over because it's going to be way out of their way. Increased traffic on other streets, same as the inconvenience. We're putting that traffic somewhere else. Bus travel restrictions, especially for school bus restrictions, they're going to have to change routes. Emergency survey restrictions, they just can't go up. They got to find a different route back or a different direction. There's the northbound drive time and distance. So it's hard to quantify, but just looking at the map, you can understand. Your drive time's longer, your distance is longer, you're burning more gas, you have many more stop signs. It's definitely not a greener option, I can tell you that. You may save a few trees, but I think if we actually got a scientist involved, he'd probably argue the opposite as far as carbon footprint is involved in the start-stop and the longer route.
Kathy's got a question.
Yeah, I have a question, Josh, about the cons. I thought that with the options, either the sidewalk or the path, that we were going to have to make special accommodations for things like brush pickup and leaf pickup on the part of the city. And is that not the case?
So those are good cons that I did not put on here. Thank you. I don't believe I got everything. This is what I could remember and what I had written down. But you're right. Option 3 and option 4 have an issue right at the wall for, and that kind of fits in the narrowing path along the retaining walls. I kind of lump that all together as the con. We lose all of what we had there before, both on the west and the east side. And I think that is a detriment to that piece of this. I personally would propose trying to move a wall or go around a wall just to provide that space if you were to go with 3, 4, 3 or 4 options. We've been saying that all along. I know it's going to cost money to do it, or potentially it wouldn't cost any money if you went around the decorative wall on the back side. But I know that comes with consequences to residents that live along there too. So I'm trying to be mindful of that. But you're right. I mean, that kind of all gets lumped into the narrowing of paths along those east walls and west walls, Kathy.
And my other question is, have we figured out, or have we talked to Mike Muhlman, who gets impacted the most, about both trash pickup and mailbox?
Yeah, I think we have to figure out, well, which option do we want to choose, and then how are we going to accommodate Mike? There is several options. There is several alternatives with each option that I think we can accommodate him. The only one that I think we have a really hard time with Mike is, I'm not so much worried about his mailbox and his trash. I'm worried about all that leaf and brush pickup. That's a tough one.
Is it possible to cut back the corner of his retaining wall if he was agreeable, so the mailbox and the trash could go there?
Yeah, we'd have to, as part of that, I'm going to try to just jump to an alternative map here. We would have to cut, I'm trying to, I don't know if you can probably see my hand there on the map. We'd have to cut this corner down a little bit into his yard. So we'd have to get onto his right of way and cut this corner down to provide some space, because we'd have to take this soil back a little bit. So we'd also lose a little greenery on that one corner that he has there.
Making him cross the road to get his mail seems unconscionable and unfair from my perspective, and unsafe.
Yeah. No, I hear you there. It's the only other option I can think of, and it's still not, I wouldn't say it's great for the people that live along here with the sidewalks right along this section, is you put the mailbox on the side street. So this one's easy, but the other two, is the mailbox would be over on the side street, and they'd have to walk down the sidewalk to get to their mailbox, right, on the side. Now, I know that's not preferred. That is another option. So you'd have a different location. There's a lot of communities that have central mailboxes for residential too, but I understand that all these are dropped off at the houses, and we'd want to try to accommodate that, Kathy, if we could. The best thing would do is if it stayed with a sidewalk along this side, or altogether, we could just get rid of the sidewalk along this side and put it along the west side. In this case, if we go behind the decorative wall, or if we're going to move the wall altogether, move the decorative wall, and then just leave the sidewalk on the east side with some terrace space over here, 3 to 4 feet, where he could put his leaves, he could put his brush, he could put his trash cans, and we had a place for his mailbox.
Yes, Tim.
Oh, yeah, Josh, since we're talking about the walls, not the decorative walls, but the ones on the other side of the street, at least as I'm looking at what we were given here with the layout, and if these lines are accurate, that wall is really in the easement, isn't it?
The east wall, you're saying, is that in the easement?
Yes.
Today?
Yes.
So, I don't want to do that. Hold on, I'm going to set my phone down for a second.
It's in the right of way.
Right away. I'm sorry.
That wall, I just moved that east wall. Right here's the east wall. This is the right of way line, this dashed line.
Right. Okay.
We have 2 or 3 feet there, but in order to kind of push it all, I mean, we still can talk to these 2 property owners and see if they'd be agree to just push this wall back, leave this decorative wall and push this wall back. We just get into the situation where if they don't let us do that, we can't make them do that. We can't, because this is a sidewalk project and the way legislation is, we can't eminent domain take some extra right of way here to push this wall back. They can agree for us to do that. We can purchase it from them. But if they don't want us to do that, we legally can't take that according to the city's attorney.
State law.
Okay, understandable. if that, but there is a couple of feet there. I think it's one of the other plans, 3, shows a little bit better, where you were trying to put a sidewalk in that area, which then would require a retaining wall behind it. And it's a 5-foot sidewalk, and it looks like there's at least another 3 feet there for a wall. I realize that's close, but also I see talking to the homeowners would be the biggest help with that.
Are you saying like this piece right here? Is that what you're saying? Like push this back?
Right. Yeah, because that's the problem, isn't it? Is that getting a little bit more? If we could get another 3 feet there, that would solve a lot of this problem.
Yeah, that's what we have is 3 feet.
Yeah. So, but that would involve rebuilding that wall, taking out rebuilding the wall, or purchasing a couple more feet from the landowners if they're so willing to do that. And in this, at the same time, eliminating their problems.
Right.
You know, so I would say that'd be a plus all the way around. The other thought, too, you had mentioned putting the sidewalks on the other side of the decorative walls, and those are 5 feet wide. In number 4, we're talking about the multi-use path being next to the roadway. That's going to be 8 feet wide. Can't we put the multi-use path on the other side of the walls? Instead of 5 feet, now we got 8 feet that we're dealing with.
You're saying put this on the other side of the wall here?
Yeah.
Well, we really don't need to in this case because we narrow the roadway. This curb stays where it is.
And I like the idea that the roadway is narrow.
What's that?
I like the idea that the roadway is narrower there. I think that'll slow traffic.
Right. It will. So we take away the 2 bike lanes, right? We take away the 2 bike lanes that are there, narrow the road, and then we have the space here for the multi-use path. Do we have the best space? We only have a couple feet of grass here, so snow storage and everything's going to be an issue still. I mean, we could put that on the other side of the wall, but we do have space here to put it without impeding, you know, without sending this onto the other side of the wall in this option because we narrow that roadway, because we take the bikes off the road for the multi-use path. And if we did it for the sidewalk, this is the space we have. We leave the bikes on there for the sidewalk. We would just have this sidewalk against the decorative wall on this.
So in that section, there's no terrace. There's no grass terrace between the street and the sidewalk and the wall. That's all
there's
concrete.
None. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I prefer there to be one. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I would prefer to have a grass space so that people would have a space for their trash, their trees, their brush. Snow storage is a big deal, you know, for snow storage in the winter and for mailboxes and stuff like that. That's why I said, you know, ultimately, if you went with the sidewalk, you could keep the section that's here. You wouldn't even have to do anything. You could keep it the way it is and just put the sidewalk on this side of the road, on this side of the wall. So the sidewalk option could result in not moving any curb at all, and it would be lower than this $1.3 million. You know, it would be lower. It would be between the 1.3 and the 900 some thousand, because we wouldn't be shifting the roadway. I think it takes about $100,000 off. I believe it gets closer to 1,250. So you save $100,000 if you don't put the sidewalk along this side, cross the street, and put it behind the decorative wall on the west side. So, I mean, to the committee, you guys can make your decisions and vote how you want to, Jennifer, but it's like, do we want to, I've always thought, can we eliminate some options and talk further about others, pros and cons, or are we going to leave all of them on the table? I know the last time we left it with option 4, I think, coming out of this committee of multi-use path on the west side. And I just want to go back to the pros and the cons. The multi-use path on the east side does have less driveways across. It has 21 versus 35. But it does actually cost a little bit more because we have to move, when we get up near the tight section, we have to move both curbs. Putting it on the east side, putting option 4 on the east side, here we have to remove both of these curbs. We have to really reconstruct a good portion of the road because we're moving both of these curbs to put the multi-use path. But when it was here before, we were leaving the curb in this pavement on this side when it was shifted over to the west side. We left it right against this wall. That doesn't really solve the leaf problem though, does it? Because there's nowhere to put leaves or, you know, it comes to Kathy's point. There's nowhere to put leaves or to put brush on this side because you can't store it in the road anymore like they're doing today because there's no bike lane there to store it in. Today, he puts it all in the bike lane. Now, I don't mean that in a negative way. He piles it up against the wall and it encroaches into the bike lane. It's the only place he has to put it. I hope I'm not coming off. I'm trying to yell in this phone, so I'm not trying to be rude about it. Apologize if it sounds like that.
Chad and then Kathy.
Oh.
Chad.
So Josh, I want to clarify the issue of moving the sidewalk to the other side of the decorative wall. Wouldn't that make it possible to improve the situation between the walls for some of the current residents along there? I'm not clear on that at this point.
Yeah, that is a good question. Let's just look at that real quickly. So that's the northern section. Sorry if it's going fast. Here is what it would look like. This is the way it looks today, basically, if we remove the bump outs, right? It leaves the curbs where they are, and you have 3 feet of space here. So you still only, Chad, I think it was Chad, you only have 3 feet of space. You put the sidewalk over here. I think you were getting at, can we shift the road even in this section to provide a little bit of space for storage or mailboxes over here? There isn't a whole lot, you know. You'd be shifting curbs and leaving 1.5 feet over here and maybe 1.5 feet over here. I mean, that's not, if you think about that, it's not a lot of space. The curb head itself is 1 foot. So you'd have 2.5 feet, right, that you could pile stuff on. It's better than nothing, but it's not a ton. But you could balance that. You could use this 3 feet of space, and you could leave 1.5 feet over on this side and 1.5 feet, plus have the foot of the curb head for storage. So you'd have 2.5 feet of kind of like flat space above the flow line of that curb along both sides of these walls.
Okay.
If you were to put the sidewalk over here and rebuild this section slightly, you know, we'd shift the curb here and we'd extend the road a little bit on this side.
Right.
Was that the question?
Yeah, you addressed the question. So I guess the other thing that I would just say is a comment for you and then for the committee. I mean, it seems to me that if we really wanted to have it all, it seems that we agree the best place for the sidewalk to be is on the east side of the street. And the best roadway is a narrow roadway. And if you have a multi-use path, it shouldn't be the only place where people can walk. And the west side of the street seems logical to me if you can push it to the other side of that decorative wall. So if we really wanted to make this a showcase of concern for all the modes of transit that go through this corridor, we would put the bikers on a multi-use path on the west side of that wall. We would create a narrow roadway that keeps traffic slow, and we would allow the sidewalk to be on the east side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Chad, you probably would. I don't disagree with that. The only thing you would have for the bikers is you probably would still have all those driveways, right? Where, yes, it would be more friendly for the casual bikers, but for the lake loopers, some of them, they would, you know, they probably wouldn't like all those along the driveways. but that would be the only big con I could see with that. You're obviously probably talking about one of the more expensive options too. You probably recognize that,
Right.
As it's sounding a little bit more like a pretty true reconstruct portion of it, or some anyways.
Well, we have elements of this in the different plans already.
Right.
But obviously, you put it all together, and the more you have, the more it costs. So
let me just summarize that here for the people so everybody's following along. Here is what's kind of out there today on the northern section, right? Chad is saying, well, what if we just kept, 10 and 10 is a little too narrow, but what if we kept, 11 and 11 out here for streets if it was just, traffic, and we hugged this curb in, and we put a sidewalk along this side with a little bit of green space, so we pushed all the traffic over to here. Basically, the traffic would all be here. We pushed this curb over to here. We kept the curb on this side basically where it is today. So we moved this curb over to about here. We'd have green space and a sidewalk on this side. Everything would be perfect. It would stay within the footprint of this roadway. The only thing that we would change then, outside of the footprint of the roadway, would be a multi-use path in the green space on this side and on the back side of this wall.
Leslie? I'm just wondering if bikers would use a multi-use path. It seems to, the casual bikers, yeah, the kids, yeah. But it seems to me some of those bikers that come screaming down that hill onto Winnequa Road, they're not going to cross the road, and they're not going to go up on a multi-use path. I don't think. Maybe they will.
No, they won't.
My thoughts are, get a sidewalk for the people. Reduce the road to slow traffic, put the speed humps, not bumps, in, and let the bikes stay on the road, except allow kids to be on the sidewalk on their bikes. Because who's going to turn them in anyway? That just seems most logical to me. And then I had one other thing, the trees. 5 trees come down no matter what, right? Because we're getting rid of the bump outs. Okay, so
there's
5 come out and 3 are ash. So that tells me 8 trees have to go no matter what. And you can mitigate trees. You can plant more. I'm all for the environment. Everybody knows that about me. But if you want to do it right, we may have to lose a tree or 2. We can plant more. That's just my thought.
Yeah, I should have said at the beginning, someone said to me I should tell everybody that I happen to live in the impacted area in Winnequa where it's going. So as you all in the audience know that I live there, but for other people, I live there, which provides me some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantage is I can see what happens on that street, and I can see what takes place. And people are absolutely right. I watch most of the people who walk, not most of the people, many of the people who walk come from the east side of the street and have to cross the street. And the worst thing about Winnequa Road is crossing the road. Personally, I know people say they're afraid of walking there. I can walk on Winnequa and I never have to compete with a car because I walk in the parking lane, and there's a parking lane, there's a drive lane, bike lane, a drive lane. I go down to North Winnequa and I got to go in and out of cars, and I got to go in front of cars. I don't have to do that in Winnequa. So, but people are concerned about the road. My concern, one of the things I wanted to say about Chad is that I thought he was introducing sidewalks and a multi-use path, and I'm not sure who I thought would use the multi-use path if the walkers were going to use the sidewalk. And I am concerned about, we need to make some improvements, but we also need to be cognizant of the environment and the neighborhood, because people in this area that's why they like to walk down there, because it's very sort of rustic and not trees. There are trees growing and there are flowers and there is stuff. So we have to lose some of it. There's no question about that. But we don't want to lose any more than we absolutely have to meet the needs that we have to do. And I'm not sure I think we need both. I tend to agree with Leslie that the bikers are going to, the fast ones are going to bike, and we talked about doing an ordinance where kids could ride on the sidewalk because.
We talked about that before.
Yep. And we need to do that because we do that on McKenna where we put the sidewalk in and we put it wider because we know the kids would ride on, particularly going to school and if you're going to Winnequa. So you want to let the kids ride on the sidewalk. I think the bikers, I watch all over downtown, the bikers share with the cars and they do it in other streets in this city. And we seem to respect one another, and I think we tend to drive better when we have to watch out for bikers. And I think bikers, they don't always bike better, but presumably they do. So I don't know where we go, but I do like Leslie's suggestion that we make a place for to get the pedestrians out of the street. And to get the bikers who are afraid to ride in the street, they can ride on the sidewalk. And you can put a bike path in. There is room, Josh, is there room in the road if we narrowed it to keep the bike path in and still put a sidewalk in?
When you say the bike path, you mean bike lanes?
Yep.
Yeah. That's option 3.
That's option
3.
So
like this is option 3 on the north end here. You know, that we have to shift the road to get that sidewalk in, but on the south end, for 2/3 of the project, option 3 leaves the exact curves where they are. Nothing changes. It's just sidewalk on one side of the road, on the east side. They actually get more space on that side because of the parking, which is great for cyclists. They get a bike lane plus a buffer of striping there, which is really protective for cyclists. I think the bike community would love it. I personally am a hardcore biker. I would not use a multi-path. I would probably bypass the multi-use path in this small stretch because it's so small and stay on the road. But I put on this year. I just hit the 3,000 mark on my road bike. So, but I think people would use the multi-use path too. But there would still be people that bike on that road.
okay.
For sure.
Then my next question is, there are at least 3 residents that, Oswegan's being one, Whitty's being one, and Byers being another one, where there's a lot of growth near the road. Are you planning to go behind that growth? Because they have concerns that people might not use the sidewalk if it was dusk and they had to walk behind the trees. Or are you going to leave it an option to the people, or how would we handle that?
Right. You know, I was thinking about that more today, Kathy, because, you know, we've mentioned that a few times where we have these areas where, you know, we go behind trees potentially with the sidewalk, and how far separated is that from the roadway? And, you know, we were worried about light at night, and I guess there's a little bit of all of that, but I mean, at night, the sidewalk's only going to be lit along here as much as the street's lit up, and I don't know if the street's overly lit in this area to begin with, right? I don't think they're very long stretches where you're meandering around trees where it's, in my personal opinion, that far behind stuff. I think you might want to keep a little bit of this lower stuff cleared out under these big trees, which is an impact to them, right? To provide the light through some of that. There's a lot of lower, you know, buffer zone there in a couple of the areas. And,
Well, some
and
the
it's either
other
that
thing-
or it's either that or you provide some lighting along the path or along the sidewalk.
The other, well, it's near the, but then it would shine into their houses unless it was downlit. The other thing is there are some gorgeous trees. I know on the corner of Owen and Winnequa, where Whitty's live, there is this humongous tree that's bigger around than anybody in this room, and 2 or 3 of us put together. And it would be a shame to lose that tree. And there are some trees in those areas that are just special.
Right. I don't think we're losing that one. That one's on the Owen-Winnequa corridor. We've looked at that several times, right?
Yep.
It's right there, the big old oak. Yeah. Yeah, we'd stay in front of that tree there. I'm looking at the trees, an oak 15-inch, shade bark 10-inch. Those are coming out probably no matter what with the bump outs. Here's a green ash that's 10-inch, a Norway maple that's 13-inch. I don't think there's anything real super big. These are 2 ash trees. There's one here that's small. It's a smaller crab apple that maybe we could even get around or try to relocate. So some of the smaller ones you could try to relocate too. There is one on the far north end that the sidewalk stays in along the east side that I feel like we get close to. I'm just scrolling up to it. But I don't think it's marked on here, but it's right up along this side. There's a large oak that's in here, and I don't think I show it on this PDF, but we counted it. That's as you get up towards Maywood, one of those last homes there. There's stuff that's really close to the road, and I think there's one large oak there that's probably 20, 24 inches in diameter. That's a nice oak that it's going to be hard to get around without going on a private property there with a sidewalk.
I have one more question. And I can't for the life of me remember where I was, but on Friday when I was driving in Madison, instead of a speed hump, and they didn't have a roundabout, but at an intersection, they had what I would describe as a rectangular buildup, like a roundabout, but it was, and what it did was narrow the lanes in those areas, so you slowed down to go around it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, right. They provided some restrictions in some of those wider roadways, so you had to go around them. In this tight corridor in the north end, we couldn't do that because we need as most space for the cars and the bikes and everything else down there. But on the south end, you could do something like that, but you're going to lose some bike space then. You're going to take away some of that bike space. Your lanes are already pretty tight here. They're 10 foot wide. They're surprisingly pretty tight for a collector street. They're on the minimum of the minimum lane width size. And I know we keep calling this a collector street, and we have people saying let's not make it a collector. Well, you don't really have much else for collectors north-south. You have Monona Drive, that's an ulterior route, and you don't really have a collector. Your collector north-south is Winnequa Road as it goes up along the north-south side along the lake. So it has that roadway classification and handles that amount of traffic. And talking to the MPO, there's really no way around it. If you try to create one way, they're going to go somewhere else, but they're still going to head north-south in those directions, like I was showing before.
Josh, I think you may have mentioned this already, so forgive me if I missed it, but when we talked about potentially moving the sidewalk behind the west wall and the north end, that would create more options for terrace space, correct?
That was kind of following up with, I don't know, somebody asked that earlier. Mm-hmm. Hold on, give me a second here. I'm getting mixed up in all the things. Okay, here we go. That would be, if we had a sidewalk on the north side, on the north side, if we had a sidewalk, so if this sidewalk wasn't here on the east side, because we crossed it on and came over and went on this other side here, you'd have this space, right? You have this leftover space. So you go back up to this reconstructive. This is what's here today, right? This is that curb and the other curb that are here today. You still do have this 3 feet of space. So you could shift this road and provide 1.5 feet and 1.5 feet on either side. That's not a lot of space. I wouldn't want to oversell that 1.5 feet. It's something, but you can't put a lot on it. As far as storage of snow, or as far as storage of leaves and brush. It may fit your trash cans because there's a foot head of a curb there, so it's 2.5 feet That might be about what your trash cans are on the bottom. Then you could fit a mailbox in. If you're still having a brush and leaf issue in that area, you probably always will with the walls that close together.
But potentially, if we still moved the west curb and put the sidewalk behind the west wall, that would create more room for terrace, potentially, correct?
Are you going to
Yes,
sidewalk on the west
basically
side?
you have this.
No, just
you have
in
this
that
sidewalk
spot.
here, and you have this 3 feet, right? You have this 3 feet to play with of grass.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Wherever you wanted to put it, right? So you could
Sure.
push this over 1.5 feet and use the extra 1.5 feet over here, right?
Yeah.
So you'd have 1.5 feet on one side and 1.5 feet on the other. You probably can't push it all the way against this wall because you'd have the same complaint from the residents on this side. Where am I putting my leaves? I have a mailbox in there. That's where I put my trash can. Potentially, they might say that too.
And Josh, you had asked a question about the one-way plan, and I guess I just wanted to reiterate as to why you presented the plan that you did, and that was because when council sent this back to us, they were specific in stating that they wanted an option where pedestrians were off of the roadway. And so what I heard last night is people were asking for staying within the footprint, but then pedestrians would still be on the roadway. And so that was not the instructions that were given. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Right. Yeah, that was the reason we didn't try to leave the sidewalk on the roadway. There's other alternatives to the one-way example, I guess. Somebody could say, well, can we put both of these together as a multi-use path? Yes, you could. But again, we would tell you, and so would the MPO and other agencies in the county, is you should probably try to separate that from this traffic. It would be good to have the curb and then that up above the curb on this side. Again, you have a bunch of reconstruction costs that you wouldn't have to just paint it. People have suggested, could we just come out and paint this? Yes, you could. I'm not going to stamp that, but you could paint everything within this existing curve like you do today and provide a one-way going one direction, but it's not going to be, if the car goes off into one side, it's going head-on to bikers going the other direction and head-on to walkers, right, to some degree. It just doesn't improve the overall situation that's what's out there today. Nobody believes that it's making it any safer, I guess, in that scenario. And we think that the traffic's actually going to go faster than what it does out there today. And that's all. I stated it earlier, and I don't think you guys could say it. I started it out. I've pondered on this quite a bit. It's somewhat hard to come to the meetings, and I do hear a lot of, people that aren't in my profession telling me that we're doing everything wrong. That's tough, and I understand it. They have things that they want to see as part of this project, and we're trying to accommodate them. I stepped back from this project, a couple times ago to allow others to get involved. I have 400 colleagues in my firm. I reached out to other firms. I reached out to the MPO, had conversations with them, the county, the DOT, and talked through a lot of these solutions. And at the end of the day, I felt good because everything that we were stating before and what we're stating now is what our profession would do. So I'm trying to keep it to that, and I'm trying not to go to this to the bare bones because I do care about some of the safety out here on this roadway. And if we want to go one way and we want to explore other options, I'm happy to help the city go that route. But there's a point at where, even I'm going to have a hard time saying I agree and I want to stamp it because of the liability that would come directly back onto me and my firm if there's a situation. I'd always point to, well, where is that? Somewhere else? Examples of it, guidance of it, standards of it. And if we can't back that up somewhere else, and it's proven and it's been studied, it's just not good. It's not good for the city. One, it's not good for the residents for us to propose things like that, and then it's not good for our profession. So I'm trying to stick within those bounds, and it's hard at times.
Any more questions? Tim?
I guess I'm debating back and forth between 3 and 4 myself. They seem to be more of a natural Monona type road in that the bike paths are there, except in 4 where there is none. But those bicyclists are going to be in that road anyway. And they're the ones who are trying to make the best time around the lake. So they're probably going as fast as the cars are anyway. And they act as a bit of a speed impediment as well. So that's helpful there. 3 is very similar because, again, it's more of a natural Monona road. If you're, and I think we're not just building this road for the people who live in that area, but for the people who bike around this area. And there's a lot of the B-cycles that go through here, and those people are the first time they're going around the lake, and to throw in something where they have to cross, as they do in 5, or cross back again, that is just a recipe for trouble, I think. So that's kind of the discussion that I'm having myself, is how to do that. I still am very much in favor of 4, and I think especially when we get up to the walls, if we can move the multi-bike path to the other side of the decorative wall, then we have enough space to get more terrace on the other side. I think that would be a good combination.
However,
We'll go in a row. Just Kathy, Leslie,
Well,
and then Jen.
I just, but you force everybody to cross the street that wants to walk on it. And you can't, I live there, Tim, I watch, I know how many people come from up there. And
Come from where, though?
they come up, they come between Winnequa and Owen Road, up Bridge Road, up all of those streets.
Okay, and then they come down Frostwoods, they come down Graham, they come down Magara, and so there are certain points where they actually cross, and that's where we have speed
I'm
bumps.
just telling you.
Yeah, well,
The accidents that have happened on Winnequa have been people crossing the road.
One.
No,
How many has there been?
there's 2 that I know of, and it's the only 2 accidents I know of,
Okay,
and it's crossing.
right, so there's been 2.
Well, but by that token, you should say we don't need any sidewalks because we don't have accidents.
Well, but people are crossing all the time, you say.
the thing it doesn't address, though, are all the people who aren't letting their children walk because they don't feel they're safe.
Because they don't have anywhere to go.
Well, they're going to school, a lot of them, but they're not going to cross Winnequa to walk and then cross back to get to Maywood to go to school. I mean, they are, but I mean, I don't know that that's real safe. We have to look at, I think we have to think about, a little bit anyway, about how many people avoid that street now, who would like to use it. I don't know. Maybe not.
Jeff?
So I guess I wanted to just enter into the dialogue here because, Tim, like you, at our last meeting of Public Works, I was struggling between options 3 and 4. And as I've said on a few occasions, I think 3 is the best option here of all the options, all things considered. I think it, as Josh's little chart here shows, the one that has multiple columns, it's probably the best for pedestrian safety, and it's also really good for bike safety. And it's still a perfectly functional automobile road. You know, we're not making it difficult for people to drive through Monona. Mm-hmm. And the big problem I have with the one-way thought is that is going to completely disrupt the south end of Monona. And we're going to create safety problems on multiple streets that right now we only have on Winnequa. And this project is going to address all of the safety concerns we have on Winnequa, which is why we're taking all the time we have taken to try to iron this out and get the best solution. So I would like to make a motion that we recommend option 3 for the reconstruction of South Winnequa, and that we do that with additional speed tables so that we address the potential speed increase concerns, which are noted on Josh's helpful chart. And I think that those speed tables should be integrated with crosswalks at the places where there are parks, and there also happen to be intersections, so that people can safely cross over to those parks at various intersections down the street. And furthermore, I would propose that we look and recommend that that sidewalk get moved to the other side of the decorative wall at the north section of this corridor, which was that's something that Josh had recommended, that the sidewalk cross over at Owen and be put on the other side of the decorative wall to give us, to avoid the putting, too many things in a tight corridor, which was my biggest concern about the number 3 plan.
I have a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
No, I don't want a second. I want a question.
I'll take it.
I'll second for purposes of the discussion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second now. Kathy?
I wish you would go down and look at what it will do if you put it behind the walls, because there are a lot of trees down there that you're going to lose. There is no parking, and people are going to lose a lot. Depending upon how many feet you go in, you're going to lose a lot of driveway space. And in fairness to the people who live there, those walls were put up before that right-of-way was determined. I mean, they were built years ago, years and years ago, and I don't know what you're going to do at John Fox's house next to her, because there's a gully, and it's going to, I think you need to go down and look and see what it does before you can say, if you would say, suggest that they consider doing it as an option, but to recommend it without, out of the blue, without any of those people being here, and without being there to see what it does. I think you need to do that first, because I think it will do a lot of, depending upon how many feet it takes. I figure it'll take, what, 10 feet?
Well, a sidewalk can safely meander through through the land. So.
Well, but it has to.
And we're talking about saving the wall. My personal opinion, which is not necessarily what I offer motions for, but my personal opinion is that the wall should be moved. Because it is the public right-of-way, and we are making this corridor less safe and less functional than it should be on behalf of the citizens of this town. And as you say, a lot of the rules were not in place, and the various zoning setbacks and whatnot were not there when that wall was constructed. And so the city can pay to have the wall reconstructed.
Well, we talked about that. We did, and it was $100,000. Now it's well over $200,000 to move it.
But this is $1.3 or $1.4 million project.
I'm just telling you. I was all for considering doing that until that came up.
Okay.
But we would all be, I don't want to say crucified, but people are already mortified at the cost of this. without adding on another over $200,000, in my opinion.
Well, Josh did say tonight, just to clarify, that it would be less expensive, potentially, to put that sidewalk behind the wall if we kept the curbs where they were at the north end of this street. So it's actually a cost savings to move that sidewalk.
It may be cost saving, but when you do improvements in a neighborhood, and I know the street belongs to everyone, you cannot do it regardless of what the consequences are to the homeowners. You have to think about what you're doing to the environment and to the homes. And I'm just saying, take a look. That's all I'm asking. They're showing the pictures now, the trees.
Right.
Leslie. Josh, did you look at how many trees would have to come down if a path was put behind the wall, if a sidewalk? Are there more that, because that's not a...
Not look specifically, but I mean, we can look right now.
So that it's not bad, but see, how many feet would you have to take if you put the sidewalk behind the wall?
5 feet for the sidewalk.
You don't need anything on the side of it?
Well, I mean,
you can't put it right next to the wall.
It's going to be a little bit on either side of it to get it in there, but if they're just going to try to cut a sidewalk in, you know, if you didn't want to take 2 trees out, which I don't blame you, this tree's in the wall, basically, but if you don't want to take trees out, then this would sit right behind here, and it would skirt between these two, right?
Have to meander.
Here, you know, it would go right between those two, so you don't have any tree loss there. You know, it would stay on the other side. This tree's on this side of the wall, this hickory. So you have these two right against the wall on the back side, but you would just stay on the other side of them. So up to this row, you wouldn't have to take a tree from here down. So that's at, you know, where this east wall starts. You wouldn't have to take a tree on this side. But you're in, I mean, Kathy, I agree with the fact that you're into yards, you're into driveways that is right away, but is, you know, has been for a long time people's yards. This is the section I get a little worried about. You'd have to be right against the wall in this section. These trees are back further, but you're going to lose 1 or 2 right up against the wall in this section. I don't think it's as many trees as you think, though, Kathy. When you get to this last little bit, it gets thick in here. It gets thick in this one section. So you have, I think, smaller trees right here, and the larger ones are sitting behind, but we'd have to verify that. I mean, I agree with what you were saying before, Kathy, is, you know, it should be an option, I guess, can we fit it along the back side of this wall without really taking more than, hopefully, 2 or 3 trees.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a big fan of moving the sidewalk over on that side. We had arguments about people crossing the street. Now we're having people cross the street.
Yeah.
If the sidewalk stays on the east side, people are not crossing the street. So a variation on this, if I may, is to move the other wall back further and keep the sidewalk on that side, on the east side. And now it's going to tie into... What's that?
You can, but...
We cannot legally do it unless they offer to.
Unless they, yeah.
No, I don't think they want to do that.
Well, have we? I'm not sure that we've asked them, but have you?
Well, I'm pretty sure they don't.
Okay. But it would solve...
Unless the minds have changed, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
There are two
that
houses that are involved, I believe, and I think that neither is interested in losing that part of their property.
I'm unclear why we can't touch that wall, but we can the others on the other side.
Because they're in the right of way.
Well, this is too.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No, it's in the easement.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Got it.
We'd have to move it back right on the right of way. We'd need a temporary easement to build it because we probably impact 10 extra feet of their lawn just to build it and get it pushed back, right? So we'd be over the right of way line just to even build it as a portion of that. Otherwise, yeah, that would be the easiest thing. I agree. I mean, if we could keep it all on the east side, that would be great. It's just, we potentially could run into a situation on the side where we cannot move the wall because we don't have participation to do that.
Can we make the lanes a little narrower in that spot?
How wide are they?
They're already at their minimum.
And they're 9.5 now. They're too
How about
narrow
the
now.
bike lane? How wide's the bike lane?
5.
Yeah. The bike lane has to stay at 5?
It's at 4.
Say 4?
I think it's like 4.
Oh, 4.
You can put it down to 4 to get it all to work, yeah.
So that gives us 2 extra feet.
4 and 10 would be preferred. 4 feet, 10 feet. And that's your minimum. That's your minimum standard.
And ADA requires a 5-foot sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep.
They're grandfathered in.
Unless you have barriers, right? And barriers that you can't get around, basically.
What kind of a barrier?
Well, sometimes, moving something that is man-made isn't really a barrier.
Okay, that kind of barrier.
Leslie?
I was just wondering, I almost hate to ask this, but did you ever look at, and I think you did, pushing to the west, the road into that property so that the east side could come in? Realignment basically of the road. I think you did look or talked about it. Was that an option? I was just thinking about North Dean, if anybody's driven on that lately. It just got finished. It meanders, the sidewalk meanders all over the place, and the road narrows, and there's lots of humps, and everybody's slow now on it. And I just wondered if you could push to the west the actual road so that you could gain space on the east for the sidewalk. And
So
probably not
that's
possible
it.
because of the walls.
Yeah, that is option 3. So
Oh, you did?
the original. Yeah,
Sorry, I missed
option
that.
1 still has that 3 on that side, right? This is how it is today. It's up against the wall on the east side. There's the curb.
Right.
Okay, so we've got it there.
There's a curb
Yeah.
here, and we have 3 feet. When we shift that over and narrow these lanes to 4-foot bike lanes, we can get a 5-foot walk in here, and we're up against both
Better
areas.
then,
I got it.
right?
Yeah. I mean, am I missing
That's
something, or
option
that solves the problem, right?
Well, except
The
there's
issue is that it's really tight between the walls, and we're getting the absolute minimum of the things we need, and there's concern that we could jeopardize the walls when we put in those curbs.
Are we talking about the east wall or the west walls?
We're talking about
I think it was the west wall that there was concern that when they put the curb in right next to it,
Right there, yeah, right
it's
there.
going to potentially undermine it, and then we may end up doing some rebuilding or shoring up of that wall, which is additional expense. And that's what leads me to say, why aren't we just moving this wall so that we do everything as it should be done and have proper terracing and things like that?
Maybe it'll move by default. Put in the curb.
by somebody's fault.
right.
Yeah. Well, good one.
Yeah, the hard part too is just snow removal up along that side. I can just see somebody, usually the trucks like to run their blade along the curb or right next to the curb or along the curb head. That's how they know there's a boundary. I mean, we're so close to that wall. I just don't want them to hit that thing. Typically, you try to leave everything 2 feet away from the face of the curb. You try to hold everything, you try to leave it 2 feet away from that curb so that it doesn't have that potential of getting struck. Here we're putting it right up against the wall. I mean, yes, today you have that on the other side, though. So it's not saying that they don't already have that. Today it is against the wall on that side. I'm going to stop sharing again. I'm going to share and show you the street view and jump back and forth, what I mean. So, today they have a foot curb head and the wall. They plow right against this curb head. If we were to move that and get a sidewalk here and narrow these 2 bike lanes by a foot, this curb would then be against this wall. So this curb would be against this wall. We'd take a foot out of each bike lane, and we would get a sidewalk right along this side with a curb right here.
So So question, Chad or Josh, if we were to move the wall, how much would we need to move it?
Well, I would defer to our engineer, but I asked the question previously, can we really have everything we need to have? And I'm talking about people being able to put their trash cans along there and all the other things that are part of a street that's been thoughtfully designed. I mean, again, we're rebuilding the street. Why would we not move the wall if that's causing us not to have the sorts of things that we would expect to have? And that was my point originally, and Josh said, well, it's true that it's too tight to really do the things we would typically do. And by the way, we might undermine it while we're constructing it. And as Josh just said, oh, by the way, when we're pushing the 50 inches of snow that we push out of the way every year, that's going to be a problem, and that's going to cause that wall to deteriorate faster.
Well, we talked about at council, if we needed to move the wall, we needed to consider that. But the question is, Josh, if we move the wall, how far would we have to move it?
So if we were to do it like Chad said, and I don't know how I answered you last time, Chad, but I'm going to answer you this time this way. Sidewalk, even the sidewalk, let's have 4 feet of grass here between the curb and the sidewalk, and let's have 4 feet of grass, because we're going to move the wall, between the curb and those new walls. So we have 4 plus 4, we got to move the face of this wall 8 feet this way. Plus, the wall itself is 1.5 feet wide, maybe, right? 2 feet? Some of it's quite wide. So let's say 10 feet. Let's say the back of the wall is 10 feet. That is going to take more trees, though, than just putting the sidewalk on the back of the wall today, I believe. Because we're going to we can't work around those trees then. We're going to move this wall 10 feet, we're going to take up all that space in between. I guess maybe that some of those will fall in that 4-foot green terrace, though, I suppose. Right? I'm thinking out loud as we're talking about that.
Beth? Beth, did you want to speak?
There we go. I'm trying to unmute. I guess I have the same concerns about people crossing the street and going back around the wall and whether they're going to use it, but was thinking that, that's not a very long stretch, and people may just go along in the bike lane like they have been in that little area if they don't feel like going across the street and behind the wall. But I do think that getting the road wide enough to accommodate in like a standard street would be seems like it's like the one part that everybody's having trouble chewing, or it's we got to go through it. Yes.
Thanks. So I have a motion and a second on the table. Do we have further discussion, or should we go ahead and vote on the motion and the second on the table?
Just to clarify, this is sidewalk on the east side until we get to the retaining wall, and then it's going to cross over to the west side behind the walls. That's what the motion was?
My intent was, I thought Josh made it clear that we would potentially save money and that this would be a good idea, but I do agree that there's a lot to be gained by keeping most of the pedestrians on the east side of the road, and so I'm willing to remove that entirely from my motion.
Okay, so I'm sure I've got this correct. Your motion is to go with option 3, and you're not going to speak on whether or not to move the sidewalk to the west side, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is it, you still comfortable seconding that motion, Tim?
I think part of his motion too was having the speed bumps
Yes.
placed, speed
We
tables.
Bumps, humps.
Humps.
We're talking tables.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that Josh, is there some magic to where these things are placed? They seem to be before or after the intersection on Winnequa. Is there?
I thought we were talking about having them at the crosswalk, so they would essentially be raised crosswalks. Is that how we had discussed before?
On 3, we don't have a lot of crosswalks marked out.
Some of them are section. I think we wanted to try to get one near Frostwood and near what's the other Lincoln by Greenwood.
I guess what I was envisioning originally was much like what's down at Grand Crossing, where it's a really wide. You come up, you're on a flat spot, you come back down again. Could that be at each one of these intersections to slow traffic at the intersections, and we could Graham, Frostwoods, Owen, Magara?
So you're talking about a raised intersection then, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. You can do raised intersections. They're going to cost more because they're longer, and I think you're going to get more speed compliance out of speed humps because they're shorter and more abrupt.
Okay.
Those intersections, while they're good, you do see them at places where the speeds are already really low.
I see.
So you're talking about Grand Crossing. Where is that at specifically?
That's the new park down by Buck and Honey's.
Yahar Lane.
Oh yeah.
Apparently.
There, because and that's a slower, really tight designed street to begin with. Here they're going to be going pretty fast, and that little up that they have, and then across the flat intersection and down, typically isn't going to slow them as well as a speed hump is going to slow them. Speed hump is going to be a little more abrupt, like we put up on Maywood, but a series of them, they can even be a little more abrupt than. Not on Maywood, on McKenna. I'm sorry, on McKenna.
McKenna. So you're talking, right now you have drawn out 3 of them during that entire length.
Yep.
It's just my opinion that that's not enough, but.
We can always add.
Well, no,
those can be cut in and added at any time. All you're losing is the pavement that's on top.
Well, that sounds like what? 5 more meetings to me.
If you want 5, let's put in 5. If you want 6, let's put in 6. There is a, I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is like a minimum spacing. You don't want them too close, though. Where you have 1, 1, 1, 1. Then you're going to get frustration out of people more than you're going to get compliance. People are really going to complain. So there's a minimum. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Isn't it one every 500 feet, Josh?
Yeah, I want to say it's 500.
Right.
I believe that's right because I looked it up before. We had a conversation before about this a while ago. So I think we have a room to add a couple more. I think in that entire stretch. Maybe you have one at about every intersection, right? And there's a crosswalk. There's a crosswalk there, no matter what. That if people are walking along the other side or waiting for a bus or whatever, a drop-off point, we could put a little platform on that side too for them to just store, on that side of the curb.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
Let's see. We're going to have a chance to kind of fine-tune this.
Well, let's do it now.
Yeah, because that's part of the design, really.
Yeah.
Okay. So the areas that I thought were a bit problematic were where Winnequa comes into Bridge. There doesn't seem to be a good way to go from the sidewalk, if in fact we are to agree with 3, to go from the sidewalk to cross the street onto that multi-use path, because there's not a sidewalk on the other side of Bridge. So how do we transition people there? That's a pretty awkward intersection. And I think it's pretty straightforward on the other end for that sidewalk to come around. I like the idea that it goes all the way to Maywood Park. So we've got a nice, clean transition line there.
So, sorry to cut you off, Tim. I'm just trying to paraphrase here. So, for purposes of this discussion, could we say that we want option 3. We would like to see speed humps at the intersections. That makes sense.
Every 500 feet.
Well, I heard intersections, but yeah, I think I heard intersections. The standard is at 500 feet is kind of the.
You don't want every 500.
But that would be a little.
We'll see.
I vote for every 500.
Okay.
That's ridiculous.
How long is this street?
We could
Well,
say
it's a half a mile from Bridge to Mordera, I can tell you
It's
that.
about
And a
2,000
mile
feet.
is 5,280
So
feet,
it's about
that's 4,500.
feet.
So
So it's
you're
about every-
talking 6.
Yeah?
Well,
you went to 6.
No, you went to 6, you went to 5.
Maybe.
And 4 or 5.
Four, I think is.
So the other thing is this is a preliminary, so
Yeah.
we'll
That's better
do
than
final
500.
design. So
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we've looked at so many different alternatives and options, and you got to think like this is like 30% design, right? Like we typically come back to you guys where we're between 50 and 90% to say, okay, here's where we've come. We've actually looked at all this. We have heart survey. These 2 or 3 things we'd like to talk more about. These connections, like you're talking about, would be made better. It's just hard to do that for all of these alternatives because we're wasting. I feel like we're wasting time and resources and your money if we do that to too much a degree on all of these when 4 or 5 of them are going to get tossed out anyway.
Understood. Okay, so I guess
Coming back to Public Works.
So we'll have another kick at the cat here then, right?
final design.
The
Final design.
will come back.
Okay, that sounds fine then.
Okay.
I'm concerned about the visibility of the crosswalks and what we can do to one sign that there are crosswalks up ahead and the way we mark them so they're dark and people notice them. Because I can tell you when people drive down that street now, they don't stop at the crosswalks. The pedestrians wait for the cars.
But the speed's going to be lower. That'll help.
Well, the speed's not going to be lower.
Well, no, not the speed limit, but the
It
speed they
doesn't matter how
travel.
fast the cars are going. They don't know. They don't realize there's a crosswalk there. And for whatever, at least the one down by Frost Woods in Winnequa, they don't seem to realize that's a crosswalk.
Are you wanting blinkers put in?
Now, but there's a way that you can, with the color paint you use or something. I mean, there's a way that you could.
Dan maybe has a suggestion.
If you look at the 2 speed humps that we just installed on North Winnequa, the same signage that you see there going north and south
Yep.
as you approach will be what we have
Yep, that's
on
terrific.
South Winnequa. Yep.
Yeah, that's the part is that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Very good. Final design.
Mm-hmm.
So
Be around for that.
I don't know. So right now, I believe we have a motion on.
One last.
Go ahead.
One last, as you guys are discussing stuff and you're trying to make motions, I agree that, we could still, if you go the sidewalk option, right, on the north side, there's still some exploration, right? Like, we know there's a sidewalk, we know it's on one side of the street. We can talk to those landowners and see if we can keep it on the east side, or if we're gonna scrunch all this in, or we're gonna move it to the west side. Again, we can decide some of those things, and we can get some better impacts up there too. The sidewalk, definitely what we're going to do, and we just got to figure out that last little bit. Kathy, you asked about like mailboxes and trash and things like that. Again, I think we're going to have one more meeting with more final design to really be able to hammer some of those
Sounds good.
details out.
Sure, yeah.
Well, and the council has to agree with what we recommend.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, we have to come out
And you know what they're
totally
like.
opposite. Yeah.
They're a tough group. So I believe I have a motion and a second on the table to go with option 3 with 5-ish speed humps, depending upon.
The appropriate number.
The appropriate number. I like that better. The appropriate number of speed humps.
How about up to 5?
Up to 5.
Up to 5.
That work for you?
I like appropriate.
Appropriate
I'd
number?
like to keep this grounded in what our engineers that design streets for a living are recommending to us. And then we can always disagree with that, but I think when we tie the hands of an engineer, we're asking for problems.
Okay, so then we'll go with appropriate number.
If that's
like
agreeable
that,
to the motion.
Okay. So, all in favor of the motion as presented indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. So,
That's for good.
okay. Sorry, I wasn't counting.
Did Beth chime in there?
She was an aye.
One abstaining, one passes.
Motion passes. Sorry. Thank you, everyone. So that was the last item on our agenda. Next, we have our Public Works Utility and Operations Report.
Nothing to add.
All right. Currently, our next scheduled meeting is February 2nd. There's a January 5th potential meeting if there's a particular item that's required for us to meet. But at this point, we will not be meeting January 5th. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Kathy. Kathy.